Hello and welcome to Credit Versio's Q&A Wednesday live for August 11th. I am your host, David Michalek. I'm a credit expert with nearly 9 years experience, and during that time, I've conducted over 10,000 one-on-one credit consultations, and I'm looking forward to helping you understand and improve your credit on our live weekly Q&A calls that we do every Wednesday on both Facebook and our YouTube channels. You are no doubtly here because you understand that credit reports play an essential role in our lives. Our insurance companies, landlord, utility providers, banks, even our employers are looking at our credit report to see how we honor our obligations. And credit reports have evolved into something much more. They've now become our adult report cards. And that's why we do these weekly live Q&A sessions. And we want to just explore what credit reports are, what scores are, and really dive into how we can take control of our credit. And today we're going to be starting off by talking about credit scores and why there are so many of them and why they're different everywhere. So to do this, there is nobody better to help me tackle this subject than my guest, who has spent years at FICO. That's the company that invented the score that's used in roughly 90% of credit decisions. So let's play a quick intro for my guest, and then we're going to get started. Okay, you know what? We are not going to play his intro. We're just going to go straight to John today. We're having a couple of technical difficulties today. All right.
That's all right. I could sit here and sing around and dance and show a bunch of pictures of me if you want me to.
Well, you know what? We might get that chance because today is the day of technical difficulties. John just let me know before we got on the call that his internet's down, so he's using his phone as a hotspot. So you'll have to. I'll ask for forgiveness in advance if we get a little spotty, but so far so good. And of course, I can't operate my software over here, but so we're off to a good start. But the important part is we're gonna cover
better. It can't get any worse. It's just gonna get better from here.
I know it's all uphill from here. It's all positive stuff. But
that's right.
What's really cool, what I'm really excited about is, I like to start off these lives with going over some of the most popular questions of the week, subject matter that I've talked about. And even though I don't really handle the phones much anymore, a lot of the comments and questions that come in are on Facebook and YouTube. And they tend to arrive in certain subjects, like just chunks at a time. People have a lot of the same question. So this week, what was really popular, again, and you and I have discussed this a lot, John, and in fact, you did some articles for us, and in fact, that's one of the first videos you did for us, was talking about credit scores, where they come from, why there's so many of them. But I think now that it's been a couple of months since we really dove into that subject matter, I think it's a good time for us to go into it again. I think we probably have some new faces that have not seen the material. Maybe they've not gone over to the coaching side of our website. So the big question is, and there's really just a couple, and you can chop these down however you want. But the first one is, where did the credit scores really come from? And the question, this leans more specifically to, why are there so many questions or so many credit scores that are different than what I'm going to find on my Experian app or my Credit Karma app, or I get a score on my Credit Karma, or I get a score on my Experian app, and I go to the car dealership, and the score they give me is nothing close to the one that I saw on my app. So why don't we start with that? Why don't we start with why do we have so many different scores, and why often are they not really the scores that matter?
Sure. So, credit scores have been around for many, many decades, and actually the first credit bureau based FICO score was introduced via Equifax in 1989. It was called Beacon. So if any of you who are watching who have ever heard of the credit score called Beacon, that was actually the FICO developed score that Equifax distributed. And then soon after 1989, TransUnion and TRW, this is before Experian existed.
Oh yeah, we're dating ourselves, John. We're dating ourselves.
That's right. TransUnion and TRW introduced their FICO developed scores. And TRW, it was called the TRW FICO score. Mm-hmm. And at TransUnion, it was called Empirica. So if you ever see Beacon, Empirica, or TRW FICO score, it's all the same thing. It's the FICO developed score, just distributed by that particular credit bureau.
John,
Those names are not.
correct me if I'm wrong. Sorry to cut in, but you were at FICO about that time. Did I, maybe I got this wrong, but were you part of that group that helped to integrate FICO into the bureaus, or did you have any role in that, or what were you doing at FICO at that time?
Yeah, so I didn't start working for FICO until after I left Equifax. I left Equifax in '97 and went to work for FICO in '97. So the
Ah,
scores were already being distributed by the big three at that time. What my what my primary function was when I first started, which morphed over time, was in 1990s. In the mid '90s is when Fannie and Freddie essentially force fed the entire mortgage industry on the use of credit scores, and so my role, among other things, was to essentially travel across the country and speak at various mortgage broker and mortgage banker events and explain exactly what this score was that all these mortgage bankers and mortgage brokers are now being forced to use. And
right.
so
Okay.
for many years, I was always the least popular guy in the room when I was doing my presentations, because I was always the guy that was telling mortgage lenders who'd been doing business for 20 and 30 years the old fashioned way,
Yeah.
here's how you're going to have to start doing it, tomorrow. And
Right.
so that was my first role that I had with the company. I did a bunch of other things. Um, but but back then, we had, it was like Gen 1
Mm.
FICO 1.0. And every few years, we would redevelop our scoring models. And whenever we would redevelop a scoring model, we would build the score independently for all three of the bureaus. So Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, that's three different models. They're not the same model
Yeah.
times three
Yeah.
bureaus. It really is three separate models. And then there were variations of those scores. So if you ever heard of the FICO installment score, or the FICO bank card score, or the FICO auto score, or the FICO personal finance score. So you
Yeah.
can start to see how the inventory of these models starts to really expand pretty quickly. And then every time it's redeveloped, you just pile another dozen or so scores on the previous dozen. And then boom, all of a sudden, here's why you have dozens and dozens of FICO scores. And
Yeah.
just because newer models are built doesn't mean that the older models go away. It's almost like your iPhone, right? I mean, if you're using an iPhone, whatever, and the new version comes out, you could still use the old version
Mm-hmm.
if you want to, or you can go buy the brand new phone. And so that's kind of a good comparison, a real life comparison that people are familiar with as to why you have all these different scores, is because there's just so many models out there available. And now, since 2006, you have Vantage Score. And
Yeah.
as of 2021, you have Vantage Score 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and 4.0. So now
Mm.
you have a competing brand of credit scores. So think Pepsi and Coke, right? And
Yeah.
and so now you have an ever growing inventory of credit scoring systems. And those are just the credit bureau based risk scores. Those are the ones that are front and center. We are familiar with those because those are the ones we talk about all the time. But that is literally the tip of the iceberg. You have
Yeah.
hundreds and hundreds of scores, most that you'll never know about. You'll
Yeah.
never see them, because they're either custom developed scoring systems that that lenders use for almost everything you do with your credit, or their insurance scores, or their collection scores, or their tenant screening scores, or utility scores. And we tend to forget that it's more than just FICO scores and Vantage scores that are used. And so to the extent that you see some three-digit number from some website or from some lender that indicates that your score is whatever, that
Yeah.
just means that
Yeah.
that one particular score at that point in time, based on that credit report, was that score. It doesn't mean that that's your score and you're going to drag it with you through history and it's always going to be the same, which is
Right.
always the answer to, well, wait a minute, I pulled my score off Credit Karma and it was 700, but then I went to apply for a loan and the lender said it was 640. What's going on? Well, what's going on is it's not the same scoring system, obviously, and it's probably not on the same bureau, and it probably wasn't on the same day. So there's
Yeah.
a ton of reasons why, that you have all these different scores. So to try to to try to get your kind of wrap your hands around that, I mean, it's impossible. It's just absolutely impossible. And no one's been able to accurately quantify the number of credit scores that are out there because you just can't do it. But what you can do is you can not worry about it and manage 3 credit reports, because all those scores are based largely on information on your credit reports. And it's a whole lot easier to manage 3 credit reports than it is to manage, 500 scores. Most of them will never have any relevance in your life until you apply for something with that particular lender or insurance company.
Right. Now, would you say that one of the questions, or the way that I answer a question that we get around here that's pretty common is, well, okay, I'm using Credit Versio. I'm plugged into Smart Credit or Identity IQ. Those are Vantage scores. If I want to find out, if I want to go buy a car or a house, what do I do? And my advice to them has always been, go to myfico.com. It's a little spendy. It's like $40 for a 3-bureau report. Unless you want to. I mean, that's the best place I can think of if you really want to focus on, okay, what is your FICO score that's industry specific at this moment in time? Also, too, maybe you can go, you can talk a little bit about, I know you touched on it, but maybe a little bit deeper into the difference between the generic scores that we see versus industry specific scores.
Yeah. So when you apply for an auto loan or a credit card, the lender, if they're using a FICO score, is very likely going to be using a semi-customized variation of the FICO score. And so for credit card, it's going to be the bank card score. Mm-hmm. For auto lending, it's going to be the auto score. And so when I say semi-customized, essentially what FICO has done is they have tuned the scoring model to be more relevant for that particular type of loan or extension of credit. So, your auto lender cares about how you pay your credit card or how you pay your mortgage. What they really care about is how you pay your auto loans. Yeah. Same with credit card issuers. Credit card issuers care about how you pay your mortgage and how you pay your auto loans, but what they really care about is how you pay your credit cards. So these scoring models pay more attention and give more weight to how well you've performed with those types of obligations. And by the way, the range of those is different than the whole 300 to 850, which is what the generic FICO scores and Vantage scores, that's how they're scaled. These semi-customized variants are 250 to 900. So you can actually see scores that fall outside of the 300 to 850 range. And that's because the lender is obviously using one of these semi-customized variations. So a really good example, I'll give you a really good example. I'll use myself. I applied for an auto loan about 3 weeks ago, and the bank pulled my credit report from Equifax and one of my FICO scores from Equifax, and they sent me a score disclosure notice. And the score disclosure notice indicated that my score was like an 879. Well, that falls outside of the 300 to 850 score range. And the reason, so what was it? Quite obviously, it was the FICO auto score, because it fell within the 250 to 900 range, not the 300 to 850 range. So that's a really good way, if your credit scores are either really, really stellar or really, really horrible, to know what kind of scoring model the lender is using. Otherwise, it's a pretty safe assumption that auto and bank cards are using these variations. Mortgage lenders, on the other hand, are not. They're actually using the generic version of the score that were built a long, long time ago, almost 2 decades ago. And so those are 300 to 850. They're not tuned to performance for anything specific. Unfortunately, because they're so old, they're also not going to have all the bells and whistles that some of the newer, more contemporary generations of their scores have.
Yeah, excellent. We got 2 questions sitting in the queue here. Scott was first. Scott, good to see you again. And then Rick's got a great question. We've talked about this a couple of times, so I haven't read this yet, Scott, so let me see if I can roll through this. Portfolio sent me a letter asking me to send them a payment that is about half of an old debt I have. They say that it will have the Bureau's update to paid in full. Let's work through this one more time. Can I trust them to do that? It's about to fall off the report anyway, but isn't it better to pay if they do what they promise? I guess once it's off the report, it's too late to save face. Scott, my position on that is always, if you got a debt and you owe it, pay it. I mean, I don't know what we're talking about as far as letting it fall off, but you're not going to re-age it. You're not going to make it spend any more time there. Settle the debt. It's going to fall off at the same time anyway. You're just going to have a zero balance until that time comes. All right. Hope that answers your question. If not, feel free to elaborate. All right. Here's a great one, Rick. I always count on Rick for a good question. So Biden is is Biden really going to abolish the three CRAs? When and how will that affect us? Well, we are talking about credit report and scores, so this is a great segue, I think.
Yeah, so the person who's occupying the White House right now, he definitely ran on the promise to replace the three credit reporting agencies with what's called a public option. He campaigned on that promise to replace the big three with a public option. What does that mean? So the public, and I actually co-presented at an event 2 years ago before the country shut down with essentially the woman who is behind this public option idea and has been pimping it, and is one of the reasons why we're having this discussion about it right now. And I had a ton of questions. What does this actually mean? And why? How is it going to be different or better? Tell me everything about it that's important. And so essentially, what the public option would be, and then I'll answer your question about is it going to happen, and if so, when, and what does that mean? The public option would be a credit bureau owned by the federal government that is managed by the CFPB. So it would be housed under the CFPB. So what does that mean? Well, that is the exact same question I had for her, and I didn't get an answer. When I asked why this was even something that we were having a discussion about, the answer that I got was, well, because of the erroneous information in credit reports, we think a public option would be better at making credit reports accurate. Okay, fair enough. So what does that mean? Which of the three credit bureaus are you going to leave standing, and then take over? Are you going to abolish Experian and TransUnion and keep Equifax and just take it over? Almost like, like a czar or something, or the king of the country. So, and her answer was, no. We're going to get rid of all of them, and we're going to create one from scratch. So that really shook a lot of people in the room up, because a lot of people in the room either worked for credit bureaus, worked with credit bureaus, had businesses that depended on credit bureaus in order for their business to stay in business. Yeah. And I think that took a lot of people by surprise. So, and I'm not a government expert, and I'm not a political science major, but a president can't just snap his fingers and make a credit bureau disappear and create a new credit bureau. So this would have to go through the process of legislation. Abolishing Equifax, well, that's Georgia. And for those of you who know anything about politics, Georgia just flipped blue. TransUnion's in Illinois. Illinois is a blue state. Experian is in Costa Mesa, California. California is a blue state. So that would result in laying off about 50,000 people in those three states that helped the person living in the White House become the resident of the White House. So if this really, really happens, I would be shocked. I don't think the people that are contemplating this really have any idea what this actually means. There are 11,000 companies that furnish information to the credit bureaus on a monthly basis. Are you going to force all 11,000 of them to now contribute data to some government database? Maybe. You'd have to do that if you're going to build an actual credit bureau database. You can't just steal the data out of one of the big three databases. Again, we're not North Korea. And FICO hasn't built a credit score on a public option database. So you're going to now abolish FICO scores and then have something replace it. What are you going to have replace it? What is it going to be? A different score, or the CFPB credit score? What? There's so many things that the idea sounds really like a great idea, I guess, if that's your thing. But there's so many details that no one has an answer to, that I would be shocked if this thing actually happens. Yeah. Having said that, you have one party that controls everything: the White House, the Senate, the House, and they don't play well together. And you never know if someone's just basically going to jam something through the system and see if it sticks. But Rick, to answer the last part of your question, when they would have to propose some sort of legislation that includes language in it for the public credit bureau option. So, and that hasn't happened yet, at least not that I'm aware of. And the CDIA, which is the Trade Association of the Credit Bureaus, is obviously very concerned about this and watching it very closely. And I know those guys, and they tell me that they're concerned about it, they're watching it, but nothing has been, no legislation has been written yet that includes a public credit bureau option. So this, the argument for doing this that this organization is making, it's twofold. Number one is that the current system is unfair, and number two, that the information is not correct. All right. The fairness issue is a matter of opinion, right? People who have FICO scores of 800 really don't have a problem with the credit bureaus, and they don't have a problem with credit scoring. Why? Because they're getting whatever deals they want with absolutely no problem at really good terms. The only people who seem to have a beef with credit bureaus are people who have bad credit or low credit scores. And guess what? I promise you, Equifax did not put a bankruptcy on your credit report. TransUnion did not stick 10 collections on your credit report. Experian didn't stick that settlement and that repo on your credit report. That was all furnished to them by some other company. Mm. And so the presumption that just swapping out one database for another database and then hoping that everything is now going to be better because of that is really, really short-sighted, because it presumes that the problem with credit reports is the database, and it's not. It's the companies that are putting stuff in the database.
Right.
That's where errors come from. Errors don't come from, most of the time, the credit bureaus. Most of the time, errors come from companies that are sending stuff to the credit bureaus. That's why the credit bureaus always go to those parties when the investigation or when y'all dispute stuff, because they're the ones that actually put the stuff in the warehouse. So again, we're watching this closely. First off, I'd be out of the business. I'd be out of business if this actually happened, and I suspect so would David. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, and so we're clearly watching this, and I'm on with David twice a month, and so we'll update you accordingly if anything actually occurs. Yeah. I really, really hope that people think this through and stop just kind of running with this narrative that it needs to be changed because it's bad. And swapping out a broken system for a broken system, it doesn't really help anybody. But anyway, no one cares what I say. No one cares what I think about it because no one really asked me about it until you just did, Rick.
It sounds like some kind of policy that was put together without really putting any thought into it. Like nobody. I think if somebody who was thinking this through rationally and listened to what you just said and has even a somewhat of a general scope of how these things work is going to step back and go, okay, well, there's no solution there. I mean, maybe we can do some other things to help shore up the accuracy of the information, but replacing something is never going. It's not going to be the answer. I can't imagine. I mean, who knows? I mean, crazy stuff is going on right now, but I really can't imagine that happening.
So follow me here. The CFPB has about the last time I checked, I actually looked this up. I think they have about 2,000 employees that work for the CFPB. The credit reporting agencies receive about 8 million disputes a year. The federal law says that those have to be responded to within 30 days.
Right.
So if you start doing the math, you have to have some group of people process or respond to those disputes.
Right.
And if you start taking a calculator and kind of breaking, okay, 8 million divided by 365 days in a year, 5 days a week, 8-hour work days, they would basically double the size of the CFPB if they pulled in enough people to staff. Because remember, this is going to be housed in the CFPB, right? They're not going to outsource it to India. They're not going to outsource it to some other country. This is all going to be managed under the CFPB. So it would effectively double the size of the agency just to manage the dispute resolution process alone. And again, I don't think people truly understand what that means with respect to the volume of these disputes that come in and the work that has to be done to respond to them.
Yeah, it's we'll keep an eye on it and report accordingly. Let's go to a couple of questions here. Shanna, if some accounts come back as verified, it's correct after the first round of dispute letters, should I send off second round? Yeah, absolutely. Shanna, first of all, welcome to Credit Versio. It sounds like you did not go through your tutorial videos. Go through your quick start videos because we cover this in detail. Always do a follow-up and move on to your next round. Give me a shout if you have any other questions. Rick again, some credit stuff. Some credit stuff is in the thing that they're passing now. Hopefully you guys can get that info soon and cover that. I hope so too. Asmir, I got my LexisNexis report. That is 104 pages long. Yep, they can be pretty long.
That's short. That's a short one. Oh yeah. No, that's a short one. Congratulations. That's a short one.
As I expected, it contains erroneous information. Should I send personal information update requests and dispute other erroneous information? John, I'm not really all that familiar with LexisNexis. If they're talking about, so Asmir, are you talking about your ID? That's what I'm pulling from this comment. Personal information update request and dispute other erroneous information. Yeah, if you've got, I'm not exactly sure how you send a dispute to LexisNexis.
Well, they're not a credit bureau. They're a consumer reporting agency, and so they have to respond to disputes, just like any of the credit bureaus have to respond to disputes. Most of the information on those 104 pages was like the information on my 400 pages, really, really repetitive, like duplicative, like unbelievably duplicative, like things like addresses, emails, phone numbers, and just repeat over and over and over again. And so, if you have stuff that's in there that's wrong, then you have the right under the FCRA to dispute it and have it corrected, just like you have the right to challenge credit report errors and have them corrected at no cost. There's really no difference. They're both consumer reporting agencies, and they both fall under the purview of the FCRA in that respect.
He's got name, date of birth, addresses.
Yeah, that's right. It's just it's a lot of what's called PII, so personally identifiable information that is only associated with you, and it's, as you probably saw, a lot of that stuff is like property that you own, addresses that you lived at. So it's a whole lot of repetitive information.
Yeah. Brandon with a question. Welcome, Brandon. I've had a Discover account that has turned into a collection. Worked with 2 credit repair companies who submitted multiple disputes without success with disputing. Advice for removal. Well, so Brandon, just so you understand how the process works, things get deleted from credit reports when they're erroneous, outdated, incomplete, or unverifiable. There's a little bit more to it when it comes to collections because you've got the FDCPA. But the fact of the matter is, if there's something wrong with the account or not wrong with the account, you've disputed it, it's not coming off, you're not getting, then pay it. I mean, it's the unpopular answer, but that's the answer. If you signed on the dotted line, you had a Discover card, it went default for whatever reason, and it's accurate. Again, this is all predicated on the fact that the information is accurate. Is the dollar amount accurate? Is it really your account? You know, who knows what happened, but if it went to a collection company, were they able to verify the information is accurate, that they own the debt? Then call them up, get a payment plan going, or try to negotiate the debt for less, possibly, and then see if you can get it wiped out. A lot of people get really scared talking to a collection company because they think that it's going to reset the 7 years. And John, I think we had a conversation about that last time. I know you wrote a great article for us recently that just posted on our website about nothing you can do is going to reset that 7 year timeline for the collection. So
That's right.
if it's possible, if it's in your budget, if it's in, if you can do it, settle it. There's a great feeling when you've got that debt that's sitting out there that's looming over your head, and it's not a friendly relationship between you and a collection company. Get on the phone, negotiate with them. There's no downside to that. See if you can make a deal, and then if sometimes these guys will do a pay for delete. It's not something that's supposed to be done, but there are companies that do it. Maybe you'll get lucky and they'll say yes, but at the end of the day, paying off that balance is going to be the thing that's going to help you. I know there's a lot
Yeah,
of nonsense. Go ahead, John.
yeah, no, and you're right. There is a lot of there's a lot of nonsense floating around in the blogosphere about that. It's one of the few scenarios, David, where I will actually suggest that you attempt to pay less than you actually owe, because when a debt collector starts trying to collect the debt, a debt collector's revenue is structured differently than the original creditor's revenue. Okay, so the original creditor, if let's say you incur a $1,000 debt with some original creditor, it doesn't really matter what kind. The fact that the original creditor has outsourced it to a debt collector means that they are tired of trying to collect it, and they don't believe they can collect it themselves. And so they're just basically washing their hands of that process and letting the pros deal with it, which are the debt collectors. The debt collector now has this $1,000 debt that they're going to try to collect from the consumer. Let's just say hypothetically that they're able to collect 100% of the debt, so $1,000. They're going to have to give, probably depending on the deal that they've negotiated with the original creditor, they're going to have to give half to 2/3 of it back to the original creditor. Okay, they're going to keep the rest as their fee, their contingency fee for being able to collect the debt. That's how the debt collector makes money. If the debt collector also, as part of their contract with the original creditor, probably also has a certain degree of latitude to offer settlements with the debtor. So they may be able to take 75% of the debt in a settlement without even having to go back to the original creditor to get their permission. Anything that would be less than that, whatever that figure is that they've negotiated, they would have to go back to the original creditor and get their permission to accept that amount as a settlement. So the debt collector is not getting 100% of the money that you're paying them, regardless of how much that money happens to be. If it's been assigned to them by a creditor, the creditor is going to get their piece of the action, and the debt collector is going to get their piece of the action. So if you negotiate a settlement with the debt collector, then the original creditor is going to get a little bit of their money back, and then the debt collector is going to get a little bit of money also for their work to collect the debt. And so I'm fine with that. Again, I'm not the morality police, and so who cares what I think? But if you're gonna negotiate a settlement with someone, then it seems to make perfect sense to do it in the scenario where the debt collector is trying to work on behalf of an original creditor. But make sure you get, like I tell everybody, make sure you get whatever deal they're offering you in writing, and then follow up with some sort of a confirmation communication with them, indicating that yes, we've accepted this amount of money and we consider it to be settled in full, zero balance, and then the credit report needs to be updated accordingly.
Excellent. Asmir, how do you dispute erroneous information on Innovis credit report using Credit Versio? You can't. It's not designed for that. It's the three major bureaus only. You just have to reach out to them directly. Brandon, thanks for the response. Does a collection agency report back to Discover as the account being paid, and will it fall off my credit report? Uh, the answer
So
to that is, well, John, did you have something to say on that?
yeah,
Or?
so I can answer that one too. So that's
Okay.
basically the tail end of the process, right, Brandon?
Mm-hmm.
So if you pay the collector or you settle with the collection agency, they they don't really they don't really report per se back to Discover indicating, hey, this guy paid us. What they do is when they collect the monies from you, they actually pay Discover whatever it is that they owe Discover for in their contingency agreement, and then they keep the rest. As far as will it fall off your credit report, normally what happens is the debt collector will update it to show that it has been paid in full or settled in full, and they'll update the balance to show zero. But they're and Discover is a credit card issuer, obviously. They also do personal loans, and so you could have more than just a credit card relationship with them. But credit card debt is not one of the types of debt that comes off of a credit report once it has been paid. The only type of debt that comes off as a matter of policy from the credit bureaus right now, once it's been paid, is medical collections. And the only time a medical collection is removed from a credit report is if it has been paid. If it has been paid by the insurance policy. So in other words, if it was actually an in-network debt and the debt was paid by the insurance policy, then yes, they are required to remove it. There's also some fairly new credit reporting standards that either went into effect either this year or last year. I don't remember, but it's really, really contemporary, that indicates that if a collection is included in a bankruptcy, meaning if the debt is discharged in bankruptcy, then the collection is also supposed to be removed from the credit report. So that's relatively new. And in the past, the update in the bankruptcy scenario was just to show that the debt has been discharged in bankruptcy, but then leave the collection account on the credit report, where now that's actually supposed to be removed if it's been discharged. So there's nothing, will it fall off your credit report? Probably not. I mean, it'll fall off after 7 years, but probably not simply because it's been paid.
Excellent. Okay. Where are we coming to here? Oh, about 40 minutes. So we're coming down to the end of it. Any other questions from anybody before we
Okay.
start to turn the bend and wrap this up? Going once, going twice. Hey, John, I have to say, considering that you're doing a mobile hotspot today, this has been the connection has been worse, even when your internet was working. So,
I legit have the worst internet. I'm really waiting for Google Fiber. They installed Google Fiber in our neighborhood. I'm
oh,
really
really?
waiting for that to go, so I can switch. But my internet is just god awful.
I remember the first time I saw fiber was about 15 years ago, and I think I bought my second home, and they had Verizon FiOS. That's their fiber, and they had all the equipment set out, and the guys spent like an hour or two digging in the front lawn. They plugged that in. Man, I couldn't believe how fast. Even to this day, I haven't seen anything that fast, and this is like
Yeah.
15 years ago. So I'll look forward to when you have that in your house. We'll have a nice, good HD signal.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent.
I can stop using my phone as a hotspot.
Excellent.
So I apologize, everyone who's watching, for the technical issues, but I'm pretty sure you care about what the content that David and I are sharing with you, not the quality of the visual, not the quality of the picture.
It has not been bad at all. I think maybe once or twice it skipped, but that's perfectly acceptable. Okay, well, John, I think we'll wrap it up here. We'll make it a short day. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining John and I today. Great questions. Enjoyed being here. And if you're watching this on a replay, feel free to pop your question in there. I go through these. I get a notification if somebody brings in a question or posts a question, and I get to them. So thanks again, John. Thank you so much for joining me today, and look forward to doing this again in a couple weeks.
Yes, sir.
All right, take care.
Well, we'll see
Thanks,
you in
everybody.
2 weeks. Thank you.